When Xiao Yan arrived at my courtyard, his face was as dark as coal. I was drinking tea, and he sat down beside me in a huff, waiting for me to pour him a cup. After waiting for a long while and seeing that I had no intention of pouring for him, he grabbed the teapot himself and poured a cup. The cold tea went down, seemingly extinguishing much of the fury in his heart. Elon. His expression softened. Regardless of whether your mother's death had anything to do with Yao'er's mother, it has nothing to do with Yao'er herself. Yao'er was still young back then. The sins of the parents should not be visited upon the children. I found it nothing short of laughable. Husband, the premise of sins not reaching the children is that the benefits do not reach the children either. You are well aware of the favoritism my father showed that mother and daughter. If. Enough. Before I could finish, Xiao Yan roared, cutting me off. Yao'er has already told me that her mother was your father's true childhood sweetheart. If your mother hadn't relied on her prestigious background to force her way in and marry your father, the person he should have married was her mother. She is the rightful legitimate daughter of the Shen family. In my past life, Xiao Yan had said the exact same thing. My reaction back then was shock, followed by disbelief, and finally, a burning rage. That day, when Shen Yao framed me for pushing her into the water, I fell into the lake right along with her. While underwater, I took the opportunity to snap her neck. By the time Xiao Yan rushed over, all he saw was Shen Yao's corpse. He held her body, weeping in grief, calling me a poisonous woman over and over again. Let them curse. It's not like it hurts me. Later, Xiao Yan swapped my prenatal supplements for abortifacients. On the day of the miscarriage, I drugged Xiao Yan with a sterilization potion. Since he loves drugging people so much, we might as well end our bloodlines together. To outsiders, Xiao Yan and I appeared to treat each other with mutual respect, a picture of a loving couple. Behind closed doors, however, Xiao Yan and I wanted to kill each other every waking moment. In the end, I proved to be the superior strategist. 1 year after Shen Yao's death, I sent Xiao Yan to the underworld to join her. Widowed at a young age, I now spend every day living a life of luxury and ease. Perhaps it was because the days were so monotonous that, upon waking up, I found myself back in the 3rd year of my marriage to Xiao Yan. It was also 1 month before he would volunteer for the bandit suppression mission and bring Shen Yao back with him. I paid a visit to the largest security agency in the capital, paying a hefty sum for them to go to Lianzhou to find someone and bring him back to the capital. Xiao Xing, Xiao Yan's younger brother. Rumors from the outside claimed that his mother was a female physician who had taken care of Zhao's father personally during his military campaigns. She had died to protect him. When Zhao's father returned to the capital in triumph, he was cradling the infant Xiao Xing in his arms. No matter how much the legal mother Xiao gritted her teeth in fury, it was to no avail. Zhao's father kept Xiao Xing by his side and raised him personally. To ensure that the position of heir would fall to her own son, Mother Xiao sought every opportunity to strike at Xiao Xing. Each time, she was discovered and thwarted by the people Father Xiao had stationed in the shadows to protect Xiao Xing. Mother Xiao completely lost control when she discovered that Father Xiao had left his most capable secret guard by Xiao Xing's side. This was the very guard she had pleaded with Father Xiao for a long time, both openly and covertly, to send to protect Xiao Yan, a request he had consistently refused. Father Xiao had spent years fighting in wars, and his body was covered in old battle scars. His health was no longer what it used to be. During his final military campaign, as if sensing he would not return, he took Xiao Xing with him. After Father Xiao died on the battlefield, Mother Xiao intended to seize the opportunity to send assassins to kill Xiao Xing. However, an imperial decree forced her to stay her hand. Before Father Xiao set out for the campaign, he requested the title of heir apparent for Xiao Yan. As the seasons turned, Xiao Yan inherited the title and became a general of great renown. If I hadn't brought Xiao Xing back, both Mother Xiao and Xiao Yan would have long forgotten that a person like Xiao Xing even existed in this world. Now, facing Xiao Yan's reprimand, I felt nothing but excitement. In my previous life, I snapped Shen Yao's neck right away. Without the household schemes, life became so boring I could practically taste the blandness. In this life, I can finally flex my muscles and show what I'm capable of. I spoke unhurriedly. Since my younger sister saved my husband's life, then let it be as you say, we shall take her in as a concubine. Xiao Yan gritted his teeth and retorted, when did I ever say I would take Yao'er as a concubine? A life-saving debt should be repaid in full. I naturally intend to marry her as an equal wife. Oh. I tilted my head, reflecting for a moment. Husband, have you perhaps forgotten? Our marriage was bestowed by the emperor himself. In His Majesty's presence, you once swore an oath that you would never take a secondary wife in this lifetime. Upon being reminded, Xiao Yan finally recalled that 3 years ago, in an effort to please the emperor, he had indeed made a vow before His Majesty never to take a secondary wife. Watching the shifting expressions on his face, I let out a long sigh. I have been married to you for 3 years without bearing an heir. Why don't you divorce me on the grounds of my 3-year failure to produce offspring? Without a second thought, Xiao Yan flatly refused, no. I lowered my gaze to the ground, a cold sneer flickering across my lips. 2 years ago, while heavily pregnant, I took a blade for the Empress Dowager. The wound to my abdomen caused me to miscarry my 5-month-old child. The precious medicinal herbs bestowed by the imperial family flowed into the Marquis of Changyuan's estate like water. Everyone in the capital knew of it. After I recovered, I was conferred the title of county magistrate, and even Xiao Yan's career flourished because of it, as he was promoted 2 ranks in quick succession. Xiao Yan, for the sake of his reputation and future, did not even dare to consider a mutual divorce, let alone repudiating his wife. I looked at Xiao Yan with a faint, mocking smile. This won't do, and that won't do either. Does my husband have any brilliant ideas that could satisfy both sides? Xiao Yan stood up abruptly. Let me think about it further. While Shen Yao was busy selecting the elderly maids and servant girls to serve her in the manor, I planted my own people among them. News arrived quickly. Xiao Yan went to Shen Yao's courtyard and had just tentatively suggested making her a concubine. Shen Yao burst into tears immediately. Biting her lower lip, she wept like a pear blossom bathed in rain. Husband, you know that I would rather die than be a concubine. Xiao Yan pulled her into his arms and continued to coax her, Yao'er, I cannot bear to see you as a concubine either. However, Yaozong is nearly a year old. We cannot keep raising him outside the manor forever. Only after you have entered the Marquis's manor can we find a pretext to bring Yaozong in. You said it yourself, Shen Lan is not as virtuous as she appears on the surface. If you were not in the manor, I would never dare to raise Yaozong right under her nose. Shen Yao remained silent for a long while before lifting her tear-filled eyes, gazing at Xiao Yan with deep affection. Husband, for the sake of you and Yaozong, I am willing to endure even the greatest grievances. Xiao Yan felt an overwhelming pang of heartache. He immediately picked her up and carried her to the bed. In broad daylight, they rolled together in passion. Chun Tao is my trusted maid. Upon hearing this, she trembled with indignation. Miss, the son-in-law and the second miss have gone too far. They actually hooked up behind your back long ago, and they even have a child together. I curled my lips into a cold smile. My dear father had a hand in this as well. Without him, Shen Yao and Xiao Yan could never have pulled this off. The only thing that surprised me was that the two of them actually had a child already. It all made sense now, why Xiao Yan, as the great general, had taken the initiative to volunteer for the bandit suppression mission in court. The bandit suppression was real. But taking Shen Yao, who was already pregnant, to give birth in another region was even more real. Shen Yao's mother, Zhao Qin, was my father's childhood sweetheart. The two were separated when my father passed the imperial examinations. Upon reuniting, my father discovered that not only had Zhao Qin remained unmarried all these years, but she had also borne him a daughter. He was filled with both heartache and guilt. After high school, he remained in the capital to serve as an official without needing to be dispatched for field experience. He navigated the bureaucracy like a fish in water, entirely thanks to my maternal grandfather's support and promotion in the imperial court. He didn't dare bring them into the manor, yet he couldn't bear to let Xiao Qin and her daughter suffer any grievances. He spent a fortune to purchase a large 3-entry courtyard residence for Xiao Qin and her daughter, keeping them as a hidden family outside. The prosperity of the capital was dazzling, and soon, Xiao Qin grew dissatisfied with being kept outside as a mere mistress. One night, after a bout of intimacy, Xiao Qin shyly told my father that she was pregnant again. My father was overjoyed and immediately ordered someone to fetch a physician. When the physician diagnosed that the baby was a boy, my father was ecstatic. Swept away by joy, he promised Xiao Qin that she could move into the manor under the guise of being a distant cousin. At that time, my mother was 9 months pregnant. As a fellow expectant mother, she felt great sympathy for Xiao Qin, who was newly widowed and carrying a posthumous child. Xiao Qin moved into the Shen residence, staying in a courtyard with lighting second only to the main courtyard. She ate the same bloodbird's nest as my mother and wore moonlight brocade bestowed by the palace. The turning point occurred on the day my mother went into labor. Xiao Qin stood by my mother's bedside, weeping and begging her to allow her to enter the Shen household as a concubine. He even pulled Shen Yao along, telling my mother that this was the daughter she had borne for my father, only a month younger than me. My mother was so enraged that she suffered a massive hemorrhage during labor. Neither she nor my younger brother survived. When my father rushed over, his first instinct wasn't to check on my mother's condition, but to cover Xiao Qin's eyes. He was afraid that Xiao Qin would be frightened by the bed full of blood. Xiao Qin snuggled into my father's arms, sobbing piteously. She explained that she hadn't intended to disrupt my mother's labor. She only wanted to give my mother a peace talisman she had prayed for some time ago. She claimed she never expected that my mother, prideful of her noble upbringing, would look down on a talisman obtained through her arduous pilgrimage of bowing at every step. My father picked up Xiao Qin and strode away, leaving my mother lying on the bed, her eyes wide in a death of lingering resentment. I was 6 years old that year. The rhythmic dripping of water and the thick, pungent smell of blood have appeared in my dreams countless times. Less than a month after my mother passed away, my father prepared to marry Xiao Qin as his new wife. He was so bold because, at the beginning of the year, my maternal grandfather became entangled in a cold case, and the entire family was banished to Lingnan. 3 days before the grand wedding, Xiao Qin went out shopping and was insulted by other noblewomen at a jewelry shop. This made her feel even more strongly that I should not be allowed to hold the title of the Shen family's eldest legitimate daughter. She wanted to get rid of me. My life was to be nothing more than a bit of extra flair to celebrate her wedding. Under the cover of night, she led a beggar, covered in festering sores and reeking of a foul stench, into my courtyard. To tarnish the reputation of a 6-year-old girl, it was truly despicable that Xiao Qin could even conceive of such a thing. Since courtesy demands reciprocity, I naturally would not go easy on her. By the time my father was led to my courtyard by the servants Xiao Qin had arranged in advance. What he witnessed was Xiao Qin and a foul-smelling beggar, completely disrobed, locked in a scandalous and heated embrace. My father clutched his chest in rage, gasping for air. "You slut!" It took several burly old maidservants a great deal of effort to finally pull Xiao Qin and the beggar apart. Xiao Qin was slapped awake by 2 strikes from my father. She wept hysterically, adamantly insisting that I was the one who had ruined her. It was I who sent someone to lure her to my courtyard and arranged for the beggars to be there in advance. Even though I was only 6 years old that year, my father believed the framing of his sweetheart without a shadow of a doubt. I was locked in the ancestral hall. Shen Yao came to mock me, only for me to tighten my sash around her neck. The serving maid was so terrified her face turned deathly pale. I ordered her to go and fetch Xiao Qin. The sharp blade hidden in my sleeve was raised high, and I slashed it across Xiao Qin's throat. In the Shen family ancestral hall, I committed my first murder. I killed the enemy who caused my mother's death and sought to destroy me. My father stepped into the ancestral hall, his legs giving way as he nearly collapsed. The woman he loved most lay on the ground, a gash so deep it reached the bone carved into her neck, with blood gurgling out. She struggled to open her mouth, but no sound would come out. After Xiao Qin died, my father fell gravely ill. Having just recovered from a serious illness, he spent his days drinking heavily and remained depressed for a long time. It wasn't until one day, when Shen Yao went to the study to find him, that the two of them closed the door and talked for a long while. After Shen Yao left, my father pulled himself together again. Soon, I learned of their plan. Kill me, and let Shen Yao take my place. The tragic news arrived: my maternal grandfather's entire family had perished on the road to exile. In this world, I no longer have any weaknesses. With nothing left but a wretched life, why should I fear death? I forced Shen Yao's head down, nearly drowning her in the water vat, which terrified my father. He no longer dares to lay a hand on me. Even when I go to the pharmacy, he is terrified that I am buying poison to kill him and his beloved illegitimate daughter. 6 months after my mother's passing, he finally wants to have a proper talk with me. He tries very hard to squeeze out a few tears, pretending to be a benevolent father. I didn't believe a single word he said. I only gave him one sentence in response: if you want your illegitimate daughter to stay alive, let her live outside. If you dare to bring her back, I can't guarantee that I won't accidentally kill her one day. My father was terrified by the hidden sleeve arrow I intentionally revealed, and he sent Shen Yao back to their previous residence overnight. Before she died, Zhao Qin's greatest dream was for Shen Yao to become the legitimate daughter of the Shen family. I will make sure that even in death, she does not get her wish. As long as I am alive, Shen Yao will be nothing more than an illegitimate daughter who can never be presented in public. Spring passed and autumn came. In the blink of an eye, I had reached my hair-pinning ceremony. The marriage engagement my mother had arranged for me while she was still alive was finally placed on the agenda. Just as I was about to marry into the household of the Marquis of Changyuan, my father brought Shen Yao, whom I hadn't seen in years, before me. His face was plastered with a fake smile. L'honneur, the Marquis' estate is vast and influential. There will surely be no shortage of concubines and chambermaids. Your looks are not exactly top tier, and you could easily be outshone by those young and beautiful low-born concubines. Take your sister with you and let her marry into the Marquis' household alongside you. With her exquisite beauty helping you secure his favor, you will surely hold the Marquis' heart firmly. I pulled out my hairpin and toyed with it as if absent-mindedly. With a careless touch, I pressed the button on the pearl flower, and a jet-black wire capable of cutting through iron like clay appeared at my fingertips. Shen Yao likely recalled the state of her mother's death. The color drained from her face, and she took a large step back. My father pointed a finger at me, wanting to scold me, but his lips trembled for a long time before he finally spat out the words, "rebellious daughter." He took Shen Yao and left. According to the servant I bribed, my father brought Shen Yao here in a hurry and left just as quickly, without even giving her a single sip of tea. It wasn't that my father was stingy. He was simply afraid I might have poisoned the tea. Sigh, he really has it hard. In order to secure this marriage alliance with the Marquis of Changyuan's estate, he had no choice but to go against his conscience and spread rumors outside that I am gentle, virtuous, well-educated, and self-possessed, all the fine qualities that a true lady of a noble house should possess. Before my mother married into the Shen household, my father was penniless. His salary couldn't even cover their daily living expenses. The reason he was able to live in luxury for all these years was entirely due to the subsidies from my mother's dowry. Now that I am getting married, I will naturally be taking all of my mother's dowry with me. As for the portion squandered by my father, the bulk of which he spent on Zhao Qin and her daughter, I forced him to sign a promissory note. When I first married into the Changyuan Marquis household, life was relatively peaceful and harmonious. Whenever Xiao Yan had free time, he would take me out for strolls or come to my courtyard to accompany me for meals. Although my mother-in-law was somewhat aloof, she had not yet shown any signs of dislike toward me. During my daily morning visits to pay respects, she didn't mistreat me, aside from reminding me to conceive an heir soon to carry on the family line. When did it all start to change? It wasn't in the second year of our marriage, when I took a fatal blade for the Empress Dowager at a palace banquet, leaving my abdomen severely wounded. That injury caused me to miscarry my 5-month-old fetus, and the diagnosis followed that it would be difficult for me to ever conceive again. Rather, it was in the third year when Xiao Yan, a grand general of high standing, took the initiative in court to lead the campaign against the bandits. My mother-in-law blamed me, claiming that because of my jealousy, I had never taken the initiative to help Xiao Yan take a concubine. As a result, even at 27, he still had no children to his name. She claimed that seeing his colleagues surrounded by children made him so sad and frustrated that he sought out the bandit suppression mission as an escape. I was speechless. What a massive injustice. It was clearly Xiao Yan who feared that taking a concubine would tarnish his reputation as a devoted and affectionate husband. How did it suddenly become my fault for forbidding it in my mother-in-law's eyes? In my past life, I was still too young, believing that when my mother-in-law suddenly brought up taking a concubine, she truly just wanted a grandson. Having lived it all once before, I see through it completely now. Only those who frame you know exactly how wronged you are. So, after being reborn, in addition to sending people to fetch Xiaoxing back to the capital, I also dispatched men to Yangzhou. I spent a fortune to buy 3-inch Yangzhou slim horses. The women were settled in the detached courtyard, served with the finest food and drink. I am simply waiting for Xin Yao to enter the Marquis's manor as a concubine. Then, I will help Xiao Yan take these 3 women in as well. In the evening, while I was having dinner, Xiao Yan arrived. He glanced at the food on my table and subconsciously swallowed. It seemed that after more than a year away, living a rough life exposed to the elements, he hadn't been eating well. He lifted his robes and sat down across from me. After waiting for a while and seeing that Chen Tao hadn't served him, his brow furrowed slightly, and he said impatiently, "Serve me some rice." Standing by my side, Chen Tao replied truthfully, "Master, there is no more rice. My lady has always been frugal and hates waste. I assumed you would be dining with the second miss, so I only prepared a single portion for her." Xiao Yan tapped the table, his patience nearing its end. "Surely there is tea? I've been in here for how long, and not a single cup has been poured." Chen Tao said in a low voice, in response to the son-in-law, "There is no tea either. The water for brewing has not yet boiled." Xiao Yan laughed out of sheer exasperation, his gaze falling on my face. "Shen Lan, just because I brought Yao'er back, you are still sulking with me." I had finished most of my meal, so I wiped the corners of my mouth with a handkerchief and gave him a faint smile. "What are you saying, husband? You cherish your sister, and I am more moved than anything. Why would I be upset?" "Then you..." Before Xiao Yan could speak, a figure rushed inside. "Sister-in-law, did you save any food for me? I'm so hungry I could eat a whole cow." The person who arrived was none other than Xiaoxing. Chen Tao chimed in with a smile, "Second young master, the madam specifically ordered me to prepare some delicious food for you." Looking at the dishes being laid out on the table once again, Xiao Yan felt a lump in his throat. His face turned bright red, and he couldn't utter a single word for a long time. Xiaoxing feasted heartily, the aroma of the food filling the entire room. Fearing he might choke, I poured him a cup of tea. Xiao Yan watched this unfold, his anger intensifying. His chest heaved violently. Had it not been for his upbringing as a son of a noble family, he surely would have flipped the table. Xiaoxing ate so quickly that he began to cough. I reached out to gently pat his back, pretending only then to notice that Xiao Yan was still there. I asked him with a smile, "Husband, aren't you going to accompany your younger sister for dinner yet?" Xiao Yan's hands hanging at his sides were clenched tightly into fists, the veins on the backs of his hands bulging. Finally unable to restrain himself, he questioned me sharply, "Shen Lan, I am your husband. You didn't save any food for me, yet you gave it to A." Xiaoxing and I both turned to look at him in unison. The word bastard was on the tip of his tongue, but he swallowed it back down. If he were to call Xiaoxing a bastard, then what would that make Xin Yao, whom he had brought back? "Shen Lan, regarding today's matter, I will treat it as you simply venting your frustration," Xiao Yan said, closing his eyes to suppress the surging rage in his heart. "I hope you conduct yourself with discretion." Xiaoxing quickly stood up and hid behind me. Sister-in-law, brother is so fierce. Does he not like me? Perhaps I should just return to Lianzhou. I comforted him softly, little brother, do not be afraid. You also bear the surname Xiao. The Xiao manor is your home. Living in your own home is only right and natural. Not even your brother, not even if mother-in-law were to return, could drive you away. A stick of incense later, a teacup came flying straight toward my forehead. I tilted my head to dodge it, and the teacup crashed onto the floor, letting out a crisp sound of shattering porcelain. Seeing that I dared to dodge, my mother-in-law, seated at the head of the room, was consumed with rage. Shen Lan, I originally took pity on you for losing your mother at a young age and being all alone, but I never realized you were someone who couldn't distinguish right from wrong. Did you truly say in front of that bastard Xiao Yan that even if I returned, he could not be driven out of the Marquis' manor? I nodded. I did say that. My mother-in-law hadn't expected me to admit it so readily, and she looked momentarily stunned. I continued, Mother, I said that for the sake of our Marquisite's reputation. After all, my brother-in-law is of my father-in-law's bloodline. Having been left to wander alone in Lianzhou for so many years, many in the capital have been whispering behind our backs that the Marquis cannot tolerate its own kin. If your husband's political enemies were to submit a memorial to the emperor, it would be detrimental to his career. My mother-in-law gave a cold sneer. What a silver-tongued devil you are. The serving woman handed her a fresh cup of tea, and she took a slow, deliberate sip. In my previous life, 1 month before Xiao Yan returned to the capital from his bandit suppression campaign, my mother-in-law left the Marquis' manor for a month under the pretext of offering prayers to Buddha. To avoid raising my suspicions, she even waited until half a month after Xiao Yan returned to the capital before coming back from her Buddhist pilgrimage. Having lived this life once before, I now know that she wasn't off praying to Buddha at all. She was clearly visiting her precious grandson. The Xiao family conspired with Xin Yao and my father to deceive me. Unfortunately for them, in my previous life, I snapped Xin Yao's neck the very day she entered the Marquis' manor. The elaborate scheme they designed to cause my sudden death and have her replace me failed to be carried out. I have always been one to hold a grudge. I shall settle the scores of both my past and present lives together. My mother-in-law set down her teacup and spoke unhurriedly, Go back and make the preparations. Pick an auspicious day to welcome your sister into the manor. To the outside world, she is a concubine, but within these walls, she is a wife, just like you. I replied submissively, I understand, mother. I will go back and prepare right away. Before turning to leave, something crossed my mind. I paused and said to my mother-in-law, Mother, my brother-in-law and Xie Jinzhao, the eldest daughter of the Prime Minister's estate, are mutually in love. While you were away from the manor, the Prime Minister's wife sent a servant to deliver a formal visiting card. Clatter. Before I could finish my sentence, my mother-in-law turned pale with shock, knocking over her teacup. What? What did you say? Her lips trembled, and she could barely get the words out. I recounted the story of how Xiao Zheng and Xie Jinzhao were childhood sweethearts, their hearts long since pledged to one another. It was as if the strength had been instantly drained from my mother-in-law's body. Her back slumped, and she collapsed into her chair. After a long silence, a hysterical roar erupted from her throat, Xiao Mu, you have deceived me so cruelly. You gave the empty title to Yen'er, yet you gave that top-tier marriage alliance with the Prime Minister's estate to that bastard. If I hadn't been reborn into this life, I too would have believed that Xiao Xing was my father's illegitimate son. In truth, his real identity was beyond noble. In her previous life, my mother-in-law died before she could ever learn the truth about Xiao Zheng's parentage. In this life, I hope that when the day comes for her to find out, she doesn't end up consumed by bitter regret. I paid no further heed to my mother-in-law's hysterics and left her courtyard. As I approached the lotus pond, Xin Yao came walking toward me. In my previous life, it was at this very moment that Xin Yao pretended I had pushed her into the water. Fuming with rage, I fell into the water along with her and took the opportunity to snap her neck. When Xiao Yan received word that Shen Yao had fallen into the water and rushed over, all he found was her corpse. In this life, not only will I refrain from snapping her neck, but I will also have the servants pull her out and save her. Xiao Yan was burning with anxiety upon receiving the news. By the time he rushed to the scene, he had even lost one of his shoes. Shen Yao snuggled into his arms, weeping like a rain-drenched pear blossom, her voice trembling with the lingering fear of a narrow escape. "Husband, I thought I would never see you again." The heartache in Xiao Yan's eyes was almost overflowing as he held her tightly in his embrace. "Yao'er, we will surely grow old together and never be parted until death." Xiao Jing appeared by my side before I knew it. I exchanged a glance with him. He said loudly, "Oh my sister-in-law, why is your hand bleeding?" I replied in a calm tone, "It is nothing. My sister was about to jump into the lake just now, and I happened to pull her back. This minor injury is of no consequence." "You monster." No sooner had the words left my mouth than my father rushed into the garden, shouting at me in rebuke. "Yao'er is your own younger sister, and her health has always been frail. How could you push her into the lake and attempt to take her life?" My father arrived quite punctually. I raised an eyebrow. "Father, this is the inner garden of the Marquis' estate, not some deserted wasteland. You are an outsider to these quarters. How can you intrude so recklessly? Are you a newcomer to the Marquis' manor, or have you been here so long that you are just about to leave?" My father was choked by my words. He pointed a trembling finger at me and stammered, "You rebellious daughter. I am your father, the father-in-law of the Marquis. Do I really need to submit a formal petition just to visit my own daughter and son-in-law's home?" "Husband," I said, looking toward Xiao Yan. "Do you see clearly now?" Xiao Yan was no fool. He was perfectly capable of seeing through the staged drama of jumping into the lake to frame someone. It was just that his heart was biased toward Shen Yao. Yao'er didn't do it on purpose. She's just too insecure. He made excuses for Shen Yao. My father chimed in, "The son-in-law is right. Yao'er has been timid and frail since she was a child, unlike some people who are cold-hearted even at a young age." I rubbed my temples. "To give my sister a sense of security, husband, please pick an auspicious day as soon as possible to take her as a concubine." My father froze for a moment, then snapped back to his senses and immediately objected, "What do you mean, concubine? I won't allow it." Yao Yao was raised as the apple of my eye. She must never be a concubine. He paused, tears streaming down his aged face. Before Yao'er's mother passed away, she held my hand and pleaded with me over and over again, I must never let Yao'er become a concubine. Sometimes, I truly admire my father's ability to lie through his teeth with a straight face. Before Zhao Qin died, she couldn't utter a single word, yet she still held his hand, repeatedly signaling her final instructions. I reminded my father, "Father, when the emperor bestowed the marriage upon the Marquis and me, the Marquis personally promised His Majesty that he would never take a secondary wife in this lifetime. Unless you want my husband to be held accountable by His Majesty, if you want my sister to marry into the Marquis' manor, she can only be a concubine." My father was so livid that his beard bristled. Just as he was about to lash out at me, Su Yao pulled at his sleeve. "Father, I already belong to the Marquis. I am willing to marry him as a concubine." My father was heartbroken. "Yao'er." Su Yao shot him a meaningful look. My father quickly understood her intention. He glared at me and swept away, flicking his sleeves in frustration. I watched his retreating figure and called out, "Rest assured, father. Once my sister marries into the Marquis' manor, I will be sure to take very good care of her." Although her voice was soft and gentle, when it reached my father's ears, it was as if he had heard some terrifying omen. He whipped his head around, his eyes filled with sheer terror as he looked at me. I was very satisfied with his reaction. If I didn't give him a push and force him to remember the tragic death of his beloved once more, how could I pressure him to take action as soon as possible? If he doesn't make a move, how can I make him fall into despair and endure endless torment? Xiao Yan held Su Yao in his arms, and just as he was about to step away, his gaze flickered toward Xiao Xing and me. With just one look, a wave of torrential rage surged in his eyes. Shen Lan, send Xiao Xing to the annex. I offered a gentle smile. Husband, I'm afraid sending your younger brother to the annex won't do. The wedding between the Prime Minister's eldest legitimate daughter and him is only 7 days away. What? Xiao Xing is going to marry the Prime Minister's legitimate daughter? Xiao Yan and Su Yao's voices rang out simultaneously. It seemed the mother-in-law hadn't had the chance to call Xiao Yan over to discuss a strategy yet. I feigned surprise. What? My brother-in-law marrying the daughter of the Prime Minister's manor is a great event that will bring honor to the Marquis' household. Are you not happy for him? Xiao Yan's face was ashen. It would be a miracle if he were happy. Shen Yao was also gnashing her teeth in hatred. She thought I had intentionally brought Xiao Xing back because I knew all along that he and Miss Xia were deeply in love and that I wanted to use Xiao Xing as my backing. Xiao Xing glanced at them nonchalantly, then said to me, Sister-in-law, the way brother is looking at me is terrifying. Perhaps I should just leave. I patted his shoulder. Why leave? Half of the Xiao family's estate belongs to you anyway. In my mother-in-law's room, shattered porcelain lay scattered across the floor. Her face was contorted with rage. That wench Shen Lan, did she really say that? Shen Yao walked up behind her and began massaging her shoulders. Mother, sister really did say that. I was there at the time and heard it loud and clear. My mother-in-law grew even more furious. Shen Lan has some nerve, actually plotting with a bastard to seize my Marquis Manor's estate. Mother, I have a way to deal with both my sister and that bastard at once. What kind of way? Let's hear it. Shen Yao looked toward the courtyard. Father, please come in and speak. Their plan soon reached my ears. I ate a grape. It was sweet, tart, and bursting with juice. My good mood wasn't affected in the slightest. The trick was too cliché, nothing more than drugging Xiao Xing and me, then orchestrating a way for the people from the Prime Minister's residence to discover us. I failed to uphold a woman's virtue and committed adultery with my brother-in-law. According to the Xiao family rules, I am to be drowned in a cage. Xiao Xing, on the other hand, was sentenced to 30 strokes of the cane, expelled from the Xiao family, and exiled 3,000 miles away. Xiao Xing walked in, accompanied by a bright and moving young lady, none other than Xie Jinzhao, the legitimate daughter of the Prime Minister. I rose and performed a formal curtsy to Xiao Xing. Your Highness the Crown Prince, they plan to scheme against you and me tonight. Shall we play along with their plot? Xiao Xing's gaze was deep and heavy, showing not a single trace of his usual playboy demeanor. It is time to settle accounts with these old noble families who rely on their ancestors' legacy and hereditary titles. Let us start with the Marquis of Changyuan's estate. According to the news brought back by the maid from her mother-in-law's courtyard, Xiao Yan was unaware of the schemes involving those few people. Upon learning that his father had arranged a good marriage for Xiao Xing, he was deeply provoked. He was clearly the eldest son. Why did his father favor the lowly offspring of a mere physician woman? Feeling stifled and miserable, I went out for drinks with my colleagues. Shen Yao was terrified that if I were drowned in a pond, the position of the Marquis' primary wife would be snatched by another noble lady. In her desperation, she came to serve me the concubine's tea that very afternoon. I immediately sent people to fetch the 3 beauties from the villa back to the Marquis' estate. 4 cups of concubine's tea, I drank them all at once. I brought in 4 concubines for my husband all at once. If word of this gets out, everyone in the capital will surely praise me for being virtuous and open-minded. That night, when a large crowd burst into my courtyard to catch an adulterer, Xiao Yan was on the bed of his newly acquired concubine, entwined with the beauty in the throes of passion. By the time he woke up the next day, everything was already over. The man he treated as a mortal enemy, privately calling him a bastard and low-born at every turn, was actually the crown prince whom the current emperor had been searching for many years. The crown prince is the legitimate son of the late empress. Years ago, when His Majesty stood out among the many princes to ascend the throne, the late empress provided him with immense support. When the late empress was pregnant, her family sent her younger half-sister into the palace to care for her. While intoxicated, His Majesty took the late empress's half-sister to his bed. My younger half-sister has become pregnant with the emperor's child. No matter how the emperor tried to conceal it, the empress eventually found out. In her grief, she took advantage of the emperor's autumn hunt to escape from the palace. The emperor has never given up on searching for the empress and their child. He even issued a proclamation to the world at the crack of dawn, appointing the first prince, born of the original empress, as the crown prince. By the time the original empress was found, she was already a corpse lying beside the body of a child who had also been dead for some time. The imperial guard brought the two bodies back to the palace. The emperor picked up the child's body, took one look, and was certain that this was not the first prince. For all these years, His Majesty has never given up on searching for the first prince. Similarly, another group of people has never stopped searching for the first prince either, with the intent to kill him. Armed with the memories of my past life, I was reborn and immediately spent a fortune to hire the most skilled martial artists from the security bureau. We traveled through the night to Lianzhou to bring Xiao back to the capital. Consort Ruan's people have already discovered that the crown prince is in Lianzhou. They are killing anyone suspicious to ensure no witnesses are left alive. Using the name of the Changyuan Marquisate as a pretext, I successfully brought Xiao, who, in the eyes of outsiders, was the illegitimate son of Father Xiao, back to the capital. After the crown prince returned to the capital, he entered the palace to reunite with His Majesty. As for why he asked His Majesty not to disclose the news for the time being, it was because he wanted to root out the mastermind behind his mother's murder and the one who had been hunting him down all these years. Noble consort Ruan is the younger sister of the late Empress Ruan by a concubine, and she bears a 60 to 70% resemblance to her. The Empress has been deceased for many years, and while the Emperor's affection for the noble consort Ruan has only grown, he has never once mentioned elevating her to the position of successor Empress. Even her two children, who frequently attend to the emperor and show him great filial piety, are deemed less important than the crown prince, whom the emperor has never even met. Last night, among those who appeared at the Marquis Changyuan's estate, besides a group of high-ranking officials, were assassins dispatched by noble consort Ruan. The sole surviving assassin was brought before the emperor, where he testified on the spot that noble consort Ruan had used their families as leverage to force them to kill the second young master of the Xiao family. Noble consort Ruan knelt before the emperor, weeping bitterly and still attempting to argue her way out. The letters seized from her palace, the poison hidden in her vanity box, and the forbidden drug specially prepared for the emperor. Furthermore, the maid who had served her for many years could not withstand the brutal interrogation and confessed every single one of noble consort Ruan's misdeeds over the years. With both physical evidence and witness testimony present, no matter how silver-tongued noble consort Ruan was, she could no longer talk her way out of it. The crown prince also tracked down an old servant who had served noble consort Ruan for many years, only to be silenced by her. The servant recounted in full detail how noble consort Ruan had taken advantage of the emperor's autumn hunt to attempt to murder the late empress, forcing her to flee the palace. The emperor was consumed with fury. He immediately stripped Ruan of her title as noble consort, banished her to the cold palace, and bestowed upon her a cup of poisoned wine. Noble consort Ruan's two children pleaded for her mercy, but they too incurred the emperor's loathing. Both were demoted to commoner status and confined to the royal villa, never to leave until death. Seeing that she had schemed her entire life only to end up with nothing and implicate both her children, noble consort Ruan was consumed by a surge of fury and decided to risk everything. Just as the palace attendant stepped forward to strip her of her noble consort robes, she pulled out a golden hairpin from her hair and lunged at the emperor amidst the chaos. A large hole was torn into the emperor's throat, and the imperial physicians cried out in horror as they rushed to cover his neck. Blood gushed out like a fountain. It was impossible to stem the flow. The imperial physicians trembled in fear, knowing that the emperor was beyond saving. The news of the emperor's passing was announced to the world the following day. Crown Prince Lu Jing ascended the throne as emperor and conferred the title of empress upon Xie Jinzhao, the legitimate daughter of the prime minister. I was granted the title of first-rank lady of mandate. It was bestowed upon me by the new emperor and had nothing to do with the Marquis of Changyuan's estate. The new emperor asked me if I wanted to divorce my husband. There are still matters left to handle. Once they are resolved, I will petition His Majesty for an imperial decree of divorce. The empress kept me for lunch and only allowed me to leave the palace afterward. Just as the carriage arrived at the Marquis's manor, someone stepped forward to greet me and lifted the curtain for me. It was Xiao Yan, who was supporting Mother Xiao. Mother Xiao was very emotional. "My child, you are finally back." I stepped down from the carriage, looked around, and asked Mother Xiao, "Old madam, are you speaking to me?" Mother Xiao looked embarrassed. "Lan'er, of course I am speaking to you. A daughter-in-law is also my child." I curled one side of my lips into a faint, mocking smile. In the entire Great Zhou dynasty, how many mothers-in-law who claimed to treat their daughters-in-law like their own children would personally orchestrate a plot to frame them for adultery? Mother Xiao lowered her head in shame. Xiao Yan snapped out of his daze and asked Mother Xiao, "Mother, what have you been doing behind my back?" Mother Xiao's eyes darted around as she shifted the blame onto Shen Yao and my father. She gritted her teeth, her face full of rage. It's all the fault of that father and daughter from the Shen family. It was their wicked idea to plot against Lan'er. Xiao Yan had more backbone than his mother. Even now, he was still shielding Shen Yao. "Mother, Yao'er did give birth to Yaozong for me, after all. Even if there is no credit, there is hard work. Just let her stay in the manor as a concubine." I chimed in, "Marquis, are you not even going to pretend anymore? You've already brought the illegitimate son into the manor?" Xiao Yan licked his lips, his voice low and raspy. "Alan, I didn't mean to deceive you. A year ago, I was drunk and mistook Yao'er for you. I never imagined that she would end up pregnant. I was afraid you would be angry if you found out, so I could only use the pretext of suppressing bandits to take her away to give birth elsewhere. Now, Yaozong is almost a year old. After all, he is of the Marquis's bloodline. He cannot be raised outside indefinitely. Rest assured, Yao'er is very gentle and sensible. She won't covet anything that doesn't belong to her. She only wishes to be a concubine in the Marquis's manor and stay by Yaozong's side as he grows into adulthood." He finished speaking in one breath, looking at me with eyes full of hope. I agreed readily. I am the mistress of the Marquis's manor, so all concubine-born sons and daughters are my children. Since they are your own flesh and blood, keeping them outside would only invite gossip. It is better to bring them back to the manor to be raised as soon as possible. Xiao Yan wanted to dismiss the other 3 concubines, but one of them was found to be pregnant. She insisted that the child in her womb belonged to Xiao Yan. I didn't believe her and prepared to administer family discipline. Xiao Yan rushed over, lowering his head in shame. He admitted with his own lips that the child in concubine Dong's womb was his. As early as the day after his return to the capital, he had visited the villa and shared an intimate encounter with concubine Dong. Judging by the pulse, the timing of the pregnancy aligns perfectly. While the other 2 concubines left the Marquis's manor with generous severance pay, Auntie Dong remained. Upon learning that Xiao Yan had not only slept with other concubines but that one was now pregnant, Shen Yao was driven to a state of madness. For a moment, she completely forgot that her goal in exhausting every means to seduce Xiao Yan and enchant him was to marry into the manor and find an opportunity to kill me to avenge her mother. Her entire attention was focused on concubine Dong. Concubine Dong was no pushover either. As fellow concubines, neither was more noble than the other. Soon, Shen Yao found an opportunity to administer an abortifacient to concubine Dong. Just as she had hoped, concubine Dong suffered a miscarriage. The abortion drugs she administered were too potent, causing concubine Dong to bleed uncontrollably. After the examination, the physician shook his head repeatedly, informing Xiao Yan that concubine Dong's constitution had been fundamentally damaged and she would never be able to conceive again. The maid reported the news she had gathered to Shen Yao and asked if she should go to her father to discuss a countermeasure. Shen Yao was full of confidence. The loss of a lowly concubine's child meant nothing, and she believed Xiao Yan would not blame her at all. Who would have thought that Xiao Yan, losing the child and flying into a rage, would kick open her courtyard gate, seize her by the throat, and curse her for being vicious? I happened to be passing by the door and accidentally glanced inside. Xiao Yan's hand, clamped around Shen Yao's slender neck, was trembling, and there was something shimmering in his eyes. He was Xiao Yan, yet he did not seem like Xiao Yan. Realizing that Xiao Yan might have also been reborn, my blood boiled with excitement. In our past life, he died too early. Now, he finally has the chance to learn the secrets he never knew. I am looking forward to his reaction. For me, it's better if he has memories of his past life. It will make my revenge all the more satisfying. The maid was my father's confidant, and she ran off to inform him anyway. He hurried over, followed by an old woman carrying a child in her arms. Shen Yao had been pampered by my father since childhood and had a fiery temper. When Xiao Yan choked her, she flailed her hands wildly to scratch his face. Xiao Yan let go and stood there dejectedly, his expression desolate, as if he had suffered a devastating blow. Shen Yao clutched her neck, her face flushed red as she coughed incessantly. My father, heartbroken by the sight, ordered the maid to hand the child to Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan had always doted on the child. This time, however, as he looked at the child before him, he hesitated to reach out. He looked toward Shen Yao. Is Yaozong truly my own flesh and blood? Shen Yao trembled, terrified by Xiao Yan's cold, piercing gaze, her words stuttering. Yaozong is, of course, your biological son. You slut! Xiao Yan grabbed Shen Yao by the throat once again. This time, he exerted his full strength. In just a few moments, Shen Yao's breathing was blocked, her face turned purple, and her eyes began to bulge. At the moment I was about to be strangled to death by Xiao Yan, my father lunged forward and bit down hard on Xiao Yan's arm. Xiao Yan withdrew his hand in pain. Shen Yao gasped for air, her face still flushed red, as she hid behind my father. Xiao Yan pointed at the door and roared, Shen Yao, take your bastard and get out of the Marquis' manor. When Xiao Yan arrived at my courtyard, I was in the middle of pruning a potted plant. His complexion was sallow and his appearance haggard. His spine, usually ramrod straight, was now slightly hunched. Elon, you've returned as well, haven't you? I aimed at a redundant branch and snipped. Earlier than you. No wonder. The color drained from Xiao Yan's face, his legs giving way as he leaned against the threshold to steady himself. The day I brought Shen Yao back, she framed you for pushing her into the water, yet you didn't wring her neck beneath the surface as you did in our past life. No wonder you brought Xiao Xing back from Lianzhou. You knew from the very beginning that he was the crown prince. I glanced at him, my expression calm and indifferent. In our past life, you died too early to know that the crown prince was the very bastard you spoke of. But I knew, and that is why I was granted the title of first-rank lady when the new emperor ascended the throne. Xiao Yan didn't care in the least about my sarcasm. He lowered his eyelids, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. In my previous life, the reason I died so early wasn't actually because I drank the poison tea you gave me. It was when I went to see Yaozong that I discovered Shen Yao's lover. Yaozong, that little bastard, was only 3 years old. His biological father got into a scuffle with me and smashed the back of my head with a rock. I was beaten half to death by them. After returning to the Marquis' manor, I literally died of rage. Unfortunately, by then, the rift between us was already so deep that you didn't even come to see me once before I died. Even. He took a sharp breath, his eyes filled with the remorse and fury that came with learning the truth. Shen Yao had planned it all along, to fake her death at your hands within a year, just to drive a wedge between us as husband and wife. Haha, that bitch. The elaborate scheme she and her lover plotted. Before they could even carry it out, you actually went and snapped her neck. Before I died, I was filled with regret. I looked toward your courtyard and made a silent vow. If there is a next life, I will never fall for your father and Shen Yao's tricks again. I will treat you well. I have returned too late after all. I looked at him and burst out laughing. Xiao Yan, stop trying to move yourself with your own sentimentality. No one pushed you into Shen Yao's bed, and no one forced you to roll around with her. Xiao Yan left with a dejected expression. The imperial decree of indictment soon arrived at the Marquis's manor. A year ago, Xiao Yan's campaign to suppress bandits was a ruse. There were never any bandits active in the Yunzhou mountain area. That year, he had taken his beloved mistress to travel the mountains and rivers where she gave birth to their illegitimate son. This was the crime confessed by Xiao Yan's lieutenant, who knelt voluntarily before the new emperor's imperial desk. The new emperor was incensed and immediately issued a decree to strip the Marquis of Changyuan's household of their titles, seize their property, and send them into exile. Xiao Yan was sentenced to death by 1,000 cuts as a warning to others. His Majesty granted me a decree of divorce, severing all ties with the Marquis of Changyuan's estate once and for all. Mother Xiao has grown old. She will die on the road to exile. What use is it now, with those turbid tears streaming down her face? Upon learning that Xiaoxing was actually Zhaoxing, the current crown prince, her mind repeatedly replayed the words her husband said when he first brought the boy home. He had never done anything to betray her. He told her not to look into the child's origins. Even if she couldn't treat him as her own son, she must not persecute him. Blinded by jealousy and hatred, she did not believe her husband's words. Reaching this point was her retribution. The night before Xiao Yan's execution, he sent someone to bring me a letter, begging me to visit him in prison. I didn't read the letter, nor did I go to the prison. My dear father has not yet been punished, and I am not happy. After Shen Yao was driven out of the Marquis's manor, she took her son to find his biological father. The man appeared to be a scholar traveling to the capital for the imperial examinations, but in reality he was a fair-skinned rogue disguised as a student. He was well aware of the things Shen Yao did behind his back. However, as long as there was a steady stream of silver coming his way, he couldn't be bothered to care. Seeing Shen Yao being kicked out of the Marquis's residence without even a single banknote, the man flew into a violent rage, punching and kicking both Shen Yao and her son. To appease Li Erniu, Shen Yao took the initiative to suggest going to the Shen residence to ask her father for money. When Li Erniu broke into the Shen residence, my father was in the study concocting poison. He intended to poison me to death. In the midst of the scuffle with Li Erniu, Shen Yao walked in holding the child, grabbed a vase, and smashed it over my father's head. My father collapsed to the ground, a large gash torn into his head, his face covered in blood. He looked at Shen Yao in disbelief. Yao'er. Shen Yao set the child on the ground, picked up the poison from the table, and said to Li Erniu, "Pry the old man's mouth open and feed this to him. Once he's dead, everything in the Shen family will be ours." Li Erniu became instantly exhilarated upon hearing this. When he pried my father's mouth open, he used every ounce of his strength, causing my father's jaw to dislocate. Writhing on the ground in agony, my father could only let out indistinct whimpers from his throat. Shen Yao looked down at my father from above and told him a truth that was cruel to the extreme. "You aren't even my biological father. I've called you dad for 18 years. You've gotten quite a bargain. Shinzing, you pride yourself on being so devoted, yet you didn't even know my mother made you a cuckold. My mother didn't leave you back then because you passed the imperial examinations. It was because she had already hooked up with a merchant and was pregnant with me. She only left that letter saying she didn't want to hinder your career because she was afraid you'd get suspicious. You think your reunion with my mother was a twist of fate? Bullshit. She orchestrated the whole thing in advance. If you weren't so blind, you would have realized long ago, I don't look a thing like you. I pity you, being so easily deceived by my mother's words that you went as far as to provoke your legal wife while she was in labor, causing her to die from a difficult birth. The stillborn child she delivered was a son, you know, your only son in this lifetime. And yet, for the sake of a fake daughter like me, you've gone and ensured your own bloodline ends with you. Xiao was so swept up in her own arrogance that she failed to notice the constables from the capital prefecture had already arrived outside the door. The evidence was irrefutable. Li Erniu had murdered a scholar from his own village and stolen his identity. Furthermore, the constables had witnessed with their own eyes Shen Yao poisoning her adoptive father, Shenzing. The two were thrown into the capital prefecture prison and sentenced to execution after the autumn harvest. As for the child named Yaozong, Shenzing strangled him with his last ounce of strength before the poison took his own life. I walked slowly into the study. When Shenzing saw me, bloody tears streaked from the corners of his eyes. I don't believe he felt any regret. It was the poison taking effect, and he was terrified. Father, I spoke softly, for the sake of Zhao Qin and the Shen mother and daughter, you caused the death of your wife and the loss of your son. Do you regret it? Blood bubbled from his nose and mouth. He truly looked hideous. I covered my nose and mouth with a handkerchief, my face full of disgust, and turned to leave. Living this life over again, the world is vast, and I want to live it differently. The story ends here. Thank you all for your company, and see you in the next one.